Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. It's joint practice day. Johnny Mac, Eagles are heading to New England to take on the New England Patriots in joint practice today. How you doing on this Tuesday morning, John McMullen?
Doing well. Late scratch for Foxborough. So, I got a lot of mental illness. I hate missing things, but I'll get over it. At least I get to be here to talk with you guys about the lone joint practice of the summer.
What do you expect from the joint practice, Johnny Mac? I know you're not going to be there, and you're nursing back the calf strain, which we've talked about on the show. Hope that's going well for you, and the ice is working, Johnny Mac. But what do we expect from a practice like this? Do you expect any fights? Do you expect to learn something else when you reach out to your fellow beat reporters who are there? What will you be asking them?
Yeah, well, the fight part of it, it's always more of an opportunity to get a little chippiness. You remember last year when the Colts were here, Zaire Franklin and Jason Kelsey taking a 40-yard beeline towards them. So you can always get some excitement from that standpoint. But, it's the most important in the modern era practice for the starters and the key players as a whole. Because they're not going to get much action, probably zero action in the preseason game on Thursday night, and not much action as a whole. Maybe if the weather was better in Baltimore, the offense might have gotten a series. Maybe not, but they didn't, and there's a good chance you're not going to see them until September 6th in Brazil. But so from that standpoint, it's very important, and that's why I don't like the lone aspect of it. There's only one, not two. Always like it when there's two. But, you're at the mercy of other teams when you try to set these things up. But typically, in years past, the Colts were only in here for one day before the game. But, whether you go down to Miami, it's typically 2 days now. They ended up with a virus that cut off the second practice, but the Eagles were able to practice down there. Cleveland has been here. Baltimore's been here. New England's been here. All 2 days in recent seasons. That format's a little bit better. And then let's be honest, you'd rather have going against a better team. I mean, I'm going to be honest. This is not the New England Patriots of old. This is not the old standard, gold standard. This is a bottom 5 NFL team on paper. So, you prefer from a standpoint of getting tested a little bit more. And, I expect you're going to see some good reports and, temper those a little bit, especially defensively. I think you're going to get good reports, and there's not much New England has on offense other than Ramondre Stevenson's a pretty good back. Jacoby Brissett's the starting quarterback right now. Drake May, obviously, a top draft pick, but it's going to be a while before he's up to speed. They don't have great receivers. Offensive line is just sort of on paper, they look like a very less than explosive offense. And defensively, they're a little bit better. But, Matthew Judon's having a contract impasse there. By the way, we got to talk about Hassan Reddick.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that.
Sure. Matthew Judon's having – and for all the people that say, hey, the Eagles avoid all these things, you're always going to have contract issues with good players who outplay their contracts. But, you don't have to sit back and be reactive about it. What the Eagles are proactive about it. So they took a bunch of hits from moving on from Hassan Reddick for a third-round pick, conditional third-round pick in 2026. How he got a little bit, his back up a little bit when he got asked about that from someone that probably doesn't understand the landscape. And he could spike the football today. He knew what was coming. But nobody else knows what's coming. So you got to bite the bullet. And, he was proactive about it. And it's, you see the reasons why it was done pretty clearly now.
Yeah,
But
no doubt. Yeah.
getting back to New England, it's not the best test. So,
yeah, I think this comment here from our friend Daytime Frank John is true. He says this will benefit New England more than us. And I think to your point, they're a team that's not that great and they're not built to win yet. And they get to go up against a really a powerhouse roster, especially on offense for their defense. So it's a great test for them. And I think Daytime Frank is correct on that comment, John, that this will benefit New England more.
I think it helps the Eagles. I mean, but you'd rather be tested by a little bit more talent. They have a great secondary, for instance.
I mean, I would have loved to join practice with the Ravens. Thought that would have been great.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been, and even then you'd probably look and say, all right, well, they got a bad backup quarterback situations, but ones versus ones would have been fun.
Yeah.
And you look for little things. The Patriots do have on paper a very good secondary. That's probably the strength of their team. So, maybe you can look at what Jalen still hasn't thrown an interception. So if you see some bad reports from that perspective, maybe that's not a positive because they got some guys who can play, and Christian Gonzalez and Jabril Peppers is there, and Kyle Duggar is there, Jonathan Jones even, but they have some guys who can play in the secondary. So, it's an NFL team. You have good players. I say it all the time. Even the worst teams have a bunch of good players. But overall, Cleveland came in last year, and the day one, that Cleveland really waxed them. If you get winning losing practice, they got waxed on day one, and a lot of it had to do with Myles Garrett. Couldn't block him. And you're not game planning. You're not going in saying, oh, we gotta chip Myles Garrett. If you go into a game, well, anybody who goes into a game against Cleveland, that's what they do. Is say, all right, how are we going to block Myles Garrett? You're not just going to leave the left tackle alone, and the Eagles might be one that can get away with it better than most, but even they're going to help a little bit. Most teams are going to build their whole offensive game plan about trying to block Myles Garrett. You don't do that in practice. So he was able to blow up a session, and he tweaked something. He didn't practice day two, and the Eagles bounced back and had a good performance. So, and they were a pretty good team, playoff level team. And that's you prefer to have that kind of test.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Good breakdown. We'll get into a little bit of Hassan Reddick talk for sure. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. A good crowd in here already this morning. Crowley's in here. Twiz the Jigga, Jeff Martin, Paul Mancini. What's up, Paul? Hope you're doing well, brother. Wayne the Pain. I like that name, Wayne. I think you changed your name. Thanks for being a channel member, brother. James Carver, our friend James Carver, has made it in. Joe Whip, SMD Eagles, Kirsten Carter. Kirsten, nice to see you here. I don't know if I've ever seen your name in the chat, but we appreciate you being here. Quan Pugh, Mr. Perez, Abraham, everybody's in here. Johnny Mac. So good show planned for you guys. We have two good guests coming up on the show today. John just kind of previewed what's going on today for the Eagles in New England. We have Bill Colarulo, a star now, Johnny Mac, Bill Colarulo, who will
I knew him, when I was a bigger star than Bill. No more. Yeah, Bill is a shooting star.
Bill is big time now with the full-time gig on 97.5. So we'll have Bill on in about 11 or 10 minutes here on Birds 365. And then we'll have Les Bowen, formerly covering the Birds on the beat. Been around for a long time. One of our best guests. Always great to talk to Les Bowen. So we'll talk to him in hour number 2. So those are your two guests today. Johnny Mac, let's get into that Hassan Reddick while we have 9 minutes. We'll break down the joint practice, I'm sure, extensively as much as we can. What do you think of the Hassan Reddick? You know, there's people out there, and I know they're being facetious and joking, but Howie, go get him.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
now
no,
they're spiking the football.
I
Did they
know. I mean,
apologize to Howie? Because you were a bunch of you were all kind of very upset by
well, we
that.
still have to see the guys on the field. I think that,
Well,
I think that
yeah,
still
it's always
matters.
about
Yeah,
evaluation if
of
Bryce Huff
course. Yeah,
doesn't turn out. But you could see it pretty evident. I've been talking about it for a long time. They're trying to thread a needle, get younger, more cost effective, longer shelf life. Guy won in $25 million. They weren't going to go to that level. It's a very difficult decision because of the way he's performed with the Eagles. But, you got to make these tough decisions. That's why I said the Eagles don't want those hard knocks cameras around, because you saw the people react to Saquon Barkley, and they weren't even being mean to Saquon Barkley with the Giants.
yeah.
If people were eavesdropping on those difficult conversations with Hassan Reddick, it wouldn't have come across positively. But that's just the nature of the NFL. You have to have those conversations. One of the things I noticed a lot of people saying, he did not request two trades in a couple months. He never requested a trade from the Eagles.
Right.
The Eagles knew what he wanted, knew what he was looking for, and they said, look, we're probably not going to go to that level, and granted him permission to seek a trade elsewhere. And the same was true, by the way, of Josh Sweat. They granted Josh Sweat permission to seek a trade elsewhere, and was one of those things very similar to a couple years ago when they had 3 defensive backs and Bradbury, Slay, and Chauncey, and they were going to keep 2. And they had to figure it out. In this case, once they went all in on Bryce Huff, they were going to keep 1. And then it became sort of a race. Josh Sweat agreed to restructure his deal. Hassan was never coming off his demands, so that was it. And the decision was made. And, from the Jets' perspective, Joe Douglas, I like a lot. Obviously, he was here from 2016-ish to 2019-ish, somewhere in that range. Good guy. There's some conflicting stories coming out of New York of what he knew and what the Jets expected. But look, when you trade for a guy who's not happy with his contract, you better have something worked out before you make the deal. And they didn't. And that reflects badly on Joe Douglas, but I don't think
Is that
it's
also on Hassan's agent, though?
well, not
Not
from the
really.
standpoint of the Jets pulling the trigger, because they were
Right.
working on a deal with Hassan Reddick before they consummated the trade. They
Right.
didn't
The agent
agree
can't
with
get a
him.
deal done, or can't tell you when to make the trade. They decide
Yeah,
to do it. Right.
exactly. So they were talking and they weren't able to get a deal done, and the Jets made the trade anyway. So that part of it's on the Jets. But from the Eagles standpoint, like, people talk about holdouts, and you don't see holdouts generally now, because this is crazy, because he's getting fined $50,000 a day, and you can't, under the current CBA, in the old days, you just waive those fines. When you agree to a deal, guy would come in, waive the fines, and no harm, no foul. Now you can't. So this is all lost money for Hassan Reddick. And I suppose if you ultimately get the 25 million, you can chalk it up and say, well, I'm getting a hell of a lot more than 14 and a half, so it's worth it. But I don't think he's getting that, and I don't think he's helping himself, because nobody else wants this headache either. So as good as a player as he is,
Yeah.
I don't think he's getting the best advice in the world.
No, I don't either. Yeah, I mean, if he turns around and gets 20 and 20 or 20 and 21, 22 million, I mean, you just lost $1 million in fine. I mean, you're already down to 20. It's definitely a tough hit. But
So
I will
now
say,
he's got it. And from the Eagles standpoint, because Jody and I used to talk about it, and all back, people can look at the archive shows, and I said, look, I mean, he's not playing here for $14.5 million. It's 14.25, somewhere in that range. And you know, he produced for the Eagles. You know, the NFC Championship year, I mean, he wrecked the NFC Championship game. He was 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting. One of the best individual defensive seasons in franchise history. So he did that for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he thought that they should have, you know, at least tweaked his contract, and it was going to be ugly. And the Eagles were proactive about it. And now that you have,
I mean, I know that the Eagles didn't want to go much higher, but when you look at like what Bryce Huff is making and what he's done, I know that obviously the NFL puts a massive emphasis on age, but sheesh, Hassan Reddick does deserve more than $14 million. He was
there was no doubt. If they were bringing him back, it would have to been, you would have had to do the Band-Aid contract, which is basically, all right, he's on the final year of his original deal. All the guaranteed money is up. So generally what you do at that point is you guarantee the 14.25 plus you tack on an extra year and give him a bunch of new money. And that's where the Eagles were trying to work in. That's the realm they were trying to work in. But he wanted 25. He wanted to be near, and maybe more. He wanted to be near the top edge rushers. And from his perspective, I get it. He's been one of the top edge rushers. But then the age comes into it. He's going to be 30 in September. And the biggest part, I'm told, from the Eagles is they rode him hard, man. He played a lot of snaps for 2 consecutive seasons. If you go back, he played a lot of snaps in Carolina, and he played a lot of snaps his last year in Arizona. So that's one of those difficult decisions in football. It's like, you're not paying a guy for what he did. You're paying a guy for what you want him to do in the future. That's the goal. And they made a decision. And the old adage is better to give up on a player a year early than a year late.
Yeah, no doubt.
And hindsight is looking good for Howie.
Yeah, I'm with Eduardo here. Says I would have given him 21. I always said at 20 million, I like it. At 25, I think it's a stretch because you know Howie would have been able to get an out of the deal and not lock in on a 30-year-old guy for too long. But anyway, we'll see what happens with Hassan Reddick. We got
they're not trading to bring Hassan Reddick back. They're not.
No, they're not. There are
people 25 million. That's why he's not here.
There are people in the chat asking you, Johnny Mac, will we bring back Hassan Reddick? I do not believe that will happen, everybody. But what will happen today is Bill Colarulo will join us. I see our man, Big Bill, in the green room. And by the way, he's not Big. I don't think he can be Big Bill anymore. He has to be like Huge Bill or like
Superstar Billy.
Superstar Bill is a good one. I don't know. We got to come up with something bigger than Big Bill.
Superstar Billy Colarulo.
Yes, I like that. We'll call him that.
I'm an old school wrestling guy. Superstar Billy Graham. Superstar Billy Colarulo.
I love it, Johnny Mac. So let's get to our first commercial break. Coming up next, everybody, Superstar Billy Colarulo will join us here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.